Hello there and welcome to this Astranti case study highlights reel, where we'll be looking at a bunch of videos from our pre-scene analysis and mock debrief series that will aid you in passing your strategic case study exam. And so by the end of this video, you will be a step closer to passing your case study exam as we go through some of the key points in each of our videos. So starting off, we have 5 videos for you today, and each video goes over different areas of the case study material. Our first video is the pre-scene analysis video, and this goes through the CIMA pre-scene that is provided to us several weeks before the exam for the strategic case study. And this video aims to help you maximize your marks and perhaps most importantly, minimize your study time, because we're all busy people, we all have busy lives, and we cannot spend hours and hours reading and analyzing the pre-scene material. So what we do at Astranti is we analyze this material for you so that you can focus more of your time practicing the theory and doing the mocks, and that is where your time is most valuable to be spent. So in this video, our SCS tutor, Pete, will be going through the pre-scene company profile. More specifically, he'll be covering the logistics side of the business, the logistics service that our pre-scene company Daistruk operates within, to give you greater context as to who our pre-scene company is and what exactly they do.
So, what is logistics? Well, logistics isn't one individual thing. It's a broad term that encompasses the process of managing the flow of goods, ensuring that they reach their intended destination on time. So at its very rudimentary core, essentially, it's how does one thing get to another on time? That is logistics. Now, of course, it's so much more complicated than that and so many moving parts in the system. And as they go on to say, this includes the planning, this includes the implementation, this includes the control required to ensure the safe and efficient management of that flow, as well as the physical transportation of materials and products. So, for context, let's say that you go back to the water bottle example, that you've purchased a water bottle and it's delivered to your front door. Is that the logistics of a water bottle? Of course not. There is a huge amount that goes into that. So first of all, the organization that produces the water bottle has got to plan the predicted number of units it's going to sell, how many it has in stock, so how much it needs to produce. Once it knows how much it needs to produce, it needs to then contact the supplier for the raw materials. How many bits of plastic does it need? Does it need any metal components for screws, for the straw mechanism if it's got a straw in it? Then needs to order it from those various different suppliers. Those suppliers themselves are going to have their own inventory management system. How many straws in completed goods have they got? How many straws do they need to create and therefore get the rubber or the plastic for that? Then how is that completed raw materials going to be delivered to the water bottle producer? Is it going to come from a different country? Does it need to be shipped on a shipping container? Is it then going to be transported from the dock to the factory where it is created? The water bottle itself is created. The inventory management, the planning, the infrastructure required around that, making sure that a lorry is there on time to load the goods to take it to the dock. Then there is something there to offload it onto the dock, onto the ship. The ship then arrives at a certain time and there is a lorry there ready to receive it, to then take it to the factory where the water bottle itself is created. Then, of course, you've got all the various different logistics that's needed within the water bottle factory, of making sure that the department that screws the straw onto the water bottle has got enough straws and enough water bottles to do so. Again, I'm being very overview and rudimentary in that, and it's not necessarily a perfect example, but what you should be drawing from that is that there is so much involved with the simple production of a water bottle. You've then got the outbound logistics as highlighted here. The water bottles then being shipped out to a warehouse, to a retailer. The retailer then will have their own logistics of then inventory management and storage and making sure that the right water bottles are going out to the customers. that there's a huge amount involved in logistics. And when you start factoring in far more complicated productions, such as the productions of software, the productions of cars, of planes, of televisions, technological goods, so much more involved in that. And the logistics system has been given to us here, the rough outline of the process. So you've got the entity here. So that's the actual organization. So in my example, that would be the company that is producing the water bottle. And you've got to have the inbound logistics from their suppliers. And their suppliers are likely to have, as I said, their own logistics as well. So the inbound logistics, that will be to do with making sure that the goods are delivered on time, the inventory records are updated, as is mentioned here. It's the procurement, ultimately. And then you've got the internal logistics. This will be the actual operations going on within the company. And it mentions there that's to do with managing goods, managing inventory records. And then outbound logistics is where it's being delivered to the customer. So where does this sit within various different theorems from CIMA? There's a couple ones that are really important here. The most obvious one that perhaps should be sticking out, mainly because of the names inbound and outbound logistics, is the value chain. The value chain is how the entity themselves adds value, where ultimately they're getting more from the customer, or the product that they are creating is worth more than the various different components that go into creating that product. And that includes, of course, things like procurement. That includes the inbound logistics. That includes the outbound logistics. That's where a company adds value to gain itself a competitive advantage. And a key point, key takeaway there, as I've written on the screen, is it's all about creating that competitive advantage. And that's where we as a logistics organization comes in. We do these things more efficiently than the company, the client, the entity, whatever you want to call them, can do it themselves, so that they add more value, so that more value is added, so that the end product, the end service is more valuable than the components going into producing it. And also thinking about your E3 as well, this is all about your stakeholder network. You're going to have a network of various different organizations. You will have the initial client, you'll have their suppliers, their customers, potentially the suppliers of those suppliers, the customers of those customers, and all of it needs to link effectively. You need to have effective IT systems and also just general communication networks that link that stakeholder network together. And all of these are potential clients for us. Now, based on this example, it may be suggesting that the client is the middle person, the internal logistics, where actually in reality, we may also be working with the customers, we may also be working with suppliers. In fact, as a third-party logistics organization, we are going to be doing that. We're going to be managing this process. We're managing the inbound logistics from the entity's supplier, we're managing their internal logistics, and then we're managing the outbound logistics to their customer. But of course, it could be that we are also the customers, the client, or the customer is a client of ours, because to this entity's buyer, the entity is the supplier. So you can imagine if there are further customers this way, it could be that there are further suppliers this way, particularly in a complicated supply chain. And so we have to maintain a relationship with all of these entities, and we also have to facilitate the relationship between the entities. So it's a very complicated system. So let's take a look at some of these specific actions at each of these stages. And let's assume again that we are the third-party logistics organization here. And we're focusing on the entity being our client in this context. So we need to look after their inbound logistics. So we need to make sure that we have a position in place for receiving and checking goods, raw materials, storing them, and updating the inventory records. So again, if we are producing water bottles and we buy 1 million straws, then we need to update the inventory records to say there are 1 million straws in storage that can be used for creating water bottles. We then have to facilitate the storing of them themselves as well, putting them in a warehouse, but not just chucking them in a warehouse, making sure they're in a specific location in that warehouse, that they are easily, you can take them when you need them, rather than imagine a garage that's full of just random bits of clutter and we don't know where anything is. It also could be that the warehouse itself, we're going to have lots of different materials for lots of different clients. Certain clients might have certain areas of the warehouse booked out, and they're going to have lots of different goods in each of them. And it could be that there are certain ones that are different than others. For example, the plastic straws, well, that can be pretty much anywhere. But if we are bringing in goods that need to be kept frozen, goods that need to be kept clean for various reasons, like computer chips that can be damaged if they get dust on them or anything, then there are extra precautions that need to be taken. One thing to potentially bring out there is about the receiving and checking goods. In a sense, the responsibility of checking for damaged goods that have come in from inbound logistics is suitable, are ready for use. And that sort of thing would be contained in a service level agreement. And it's also imperative that we're aware of that because, of course, this is our responsibilities to our clients. So in a sense, they are outsourcing the quality control to us as well. So it's not just about the delivery and the timing and updating the systems. It's also things such as quality control, which is part of our responsibility. Then we have the internal logistics, so moving goods within the organization. So again, maintaining inventory records and managing the goods as well, ensuring that all the necessary raw materials and components are delivered to the right factories in time to be turned into the product, and then that product is then put to side or put wherever it needs to be before it is then shipped out. So again, very, very important. And again, necessary that we are working closely within the organization. Before finally, the outbound logistics where it is shipped to customers. Now, again, this could be business to business, it could be business to consumer, but ultimately it's all about dispatching it on time so it goes where it needs to go. Now, this could be a food manufacturer making sure that goods are shipped out to a supermarket on time. It could be that a warehouse is shipping out to another warehouse for a wholesaler on time. Again, it could be anything, anyone that is a customer. But like with the supplier, we also need to be in sync with that particular buyer as well. We need to make sure that they are aware of when goods are going to be delivered, when they want them as well. So there's a lot of different components to it. It's quite a complex network that all needs to be linked together effectively. So, of course, having a very up-to-date communication system, software system, managing the inventory all together, it'd be far better to have one system that incorporates all of this than for each of these to have their own completely different incompatible systems. That would be very complicated. So that's where your IT services, which is actually a key component. We think of logistics as transport of cars, lorries, trains, ships, etc. But actually a big part of logistics is creating the IT infrastructure and the network across the various different entities.
Then for our next video, which is going to be the strategic analysis, where we look at the bigger picture. And the point of this video is where we try to understand our pre-scene company Daistruk, where it is going and how you can relate then the pre-scene to key models found in E3, P3 and F3. Now, while you may be the Senior Finance Manager in the SCS exam, appreciating Daistruk's strategic direction will help you write well-informed answers in the exam, particularly due to your seniority in the business at this stage in the SCS exam. So the goal is to maximize your marks once again by highlighting some of the key points on the pre-scene and cutting down on your study time by making the connection between the pre-scene and different theoretical models. And so in this video, Pete will explain how we use the rational planning model to structure this video to perform the analysis, and then we'll be going through one aspect of it, which is a SWOT analysis for Daistruk.
how this video itself is going to work is we're going to use the rational model. So we're going to look at where the organization currently is, where they want to be, what ultimately is their aim, what their objectives are, how they want to operate, and then finally how they are going to get there. And that's the business strategy. That's the bridge between the now and where they want to be. So when we're looking at the future, we'll look at things like the mission of the organization. What ultimately is it about, the mission and vision of it? The balanced scorecard, how they can measure their progress towards achieving those aims, and how they are governed and administered. Then look at ethics and corporate social responsibility and the success factors for the organization, what it is that is going to help them to maintain their competitive advantage to get to where they want to be, and the stakeholders that are crucial to the organization. So that's ultimately the future, where they're heading, or the important components of the future. We'll then look at where they are now, looking at the greater business environment with the Pestel analysis, the specific competitive environment of the industry itself with Porter's 5 forces, and then internally at Daistruk itself with a SWOT analysis. We'll then look at the business strategy, looking at potential generic strategies for the organization, what generic strategy it's following, then the ANSOS matrix for potential options to help them to improve, to expand, to build, and then methods of growth to get there. We'll then finish off by defining the business strategy and the strategies going forward for the organization. So quite a lot to get through, and we're going to start by taking a look at the future, where the company is heading, where it wants to be. We'll start. So now on to SWOT, and similar to the Mendelow's, this is just a few weaknesses, strengths, opportunities, threats. It's not an exhaustive list. Sure, there are plenty of other ones that we might even come up with some more as we're going through it, and will have come up with some more as we were going through the pre-scene, and you might have your own as well. But just a summary of some of the key strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And again, how you would use this information in the exam is, if you know that something is a strength of yours, you capitalize on it, you can build on it. You know something is a weakness, does some of these strategies you're suggesting help overcome these weaknesses? Are we taking advantage of suitable opportunities? Have we mitigated against potential threats, for example? So some key strengths to the organization: we are a listed, we are a safe investment, our share price has risen, we've big, powerful company, good market position, size of it, the reputation of the organization is all of these are key strengths of the organization. We can build, we can capitalize on these strengths with our strategies going forward. Some of the weaknesses could be the very low margins, the poor cash balance that we have, only 32 million Rwandan dollars in the bank, a lot of which might be needed for working capital or trade payables well over 200 million Rwandan dollars, etc. So as a result, we have very little money for investment. There are also quite a few risks not accounted for in the pre-scene as well, such as economic and political risk, the risk posed by the driver shortage, and so on. There's many more that we looked at in the pre-scene. Also risks to the succession as well, the board members, if one of them were to leave, what kind of impact would that have on the share price? There was no talk of the nomination committee having anyone lined up to replace them. And also CSR as well, big part of being a good corporate citizen and having sustainable initiatives as well. It's mentioned throughout the pre-scene about the importance of sustainability, and that was even part of the vision statement of the organization, but there was no real talk of any kind of CSR policies or any CSR programs, anything like that in place. With regards to opportunities, quite a lot of things that they could potentially do. We have, of course, the standard ANSOF options. We're going to come on to that a bit later in this video as well, looking at whether they could expand in the existing market, look after new markets, or bring new services to their existing markets, and so on. Got the idea of potentially expanding into developing countries as well as the infrastructure develops, use their home knowledge. If we think about Porter's Diamond, everything they've used and utilized to become competitive in a developed nation can be applied, and you can get a real head start on the organizations that are starting out in these developing countries. Also, the opportunity for extra technological developments and the impacts that will have on the business, acquiring other companies or working with companies in joint venues to improve the services provided, such as courier services or fourth and fifth party logistics and consulting services. Also mentioned about the possibility of doing logistics for military and government contracts as well. That can be controversial, but there is still a huge market in there, particularly in organizations or countries with large militaries. And also training schools, I mentioned. The idea of whether that was having a trade school for drivers and people working in the warehouses, sponsoring that or doing that. It gives you good corporate social responsibility points, but it also is relevant to ensuring that you've got a steady supply of qualified staff that are perhaps going to be brought into your organization. So they're good points to bring up there. And threats generally quite generic in the pre-scene, but they're also ones that you can then easily talk about. So you can prepare for these in advance. Issues with the economy, issues to your reputation, how do you respond to those? With what actions do you take to stop staffing becoming more of an issue as time goes by? And cybersecurity as well, big P3 topic there. So quite a few things to keep you busy with regards to thinking about how you would use these, how you talk about these, how you'd approach these in the exam, but all ones that would be very valid, ones that would get you marks in your case study exam.
The third video then is the industry video, and this is a summarization of the industry pack delivered by our industry researcher Kenny, who will guide you through some of the key issues that are present in the logistics industry. Now, examiners like to see you apply real-world examples where possible, so the industry pack is a good way to eke out some extra marks. And what we're looking at now, though, is Kenny's explanation of the types of services that our logistics industry pre-scene company will likely experience, and of course explain why this might be relevant to our pre-scene company.
Let's look at the service that logistical companies provide. Almost all businesses have an element of logistics that need managing, and these take a lot of time and effort. So therefore, many companies outsource their logistics to external firms who can perform these tasks more efficiently. Logistics companies help manage the supply chain. It's a broader term than just transport and involves storage, handling, inventory, and packaging. It's more than just putting a product on a vehicle and waving it goodbye. The top logistics companies in the world provide a highly efficient, multifaceted service, which is why many top companies outsource them. For example, even a big company like Apple uses FedEx and UPS to transport its tech across the world. These companies must carefully manage a large number of people, complex technology, and sometimes unpredictable transportation to ensure that goods are delivered as quickly as possible. If deliveries are slow, it damages relationships with clients, who can easily find alternatives in this competitive industry. When a company outsources its logistics, there's different degrees to which it can be done. With two-party logistics, transport will be outsourced, but still directed by the company. Third-party logistics provides offering a range of services and can warehouse and deliver goods, as well as managing the delivery of the goods itself. 4PL extends this, taking responsibility for the strategy underlying logistics. Especially for more complex providers, this largely depends on technology use. By using complex IT systems, inventories can be tracked, deliveries monitored, and situations simulated beforehand so the process can be handled as efficiently as possible. This also involves data analysis, which can help a company run warehouses and transport efficiently and learn from previous decisions, maybe mistakes even. Let's look at how each chain of logistics works through analysing Mercedes-Benz. Like most companies, it uses a variety of 3PL, though it does run some warehouses itself. Inbound logistics focuses on the procurement of goods. This means receiving and checking goods, storing them, and updating inventory records. Mercedes manufactures luxury cars, and it needs quality steel to do that. The challenge for Mercedes, based in Europe, is getting the steel from America to Stuttgart, Germany. Here's how it does that. The global logistics company, Senior, manages the shipment of materials from truck to container, and the company Contago is responsible for transferring sea containers to trucks and moving these to inland waterways or rail lines. These are then loaded onto freighters and arrive at a Mercedes factory. Internal logistics is based around how a company handles and manages goods within the entity. For example, Mercedes opened a consolidation center in Speyer, Germany, to help improve its internal logistics. This enables it to speed up material flows to the stations where parts and components are installed within its vehicles. This also helps to reduce inventories, as parts are quickly delivered to factories when they are needed. These processes are handled directly by Mercedes-Benz. Outbound logistics concerns where a company stores its goods, packs them, dispatches them, and then gets them to consumers. Mercedes uses its global logistics center in Germersheim. It has an effective storage area of 1.1 million square meters. It offers modern storage techniques and is the largest automotive warehouse in the world. It outsources the running of these warehouses. For example, its parts logistics center in the UK is operated by XPO Logistics, which also then transports the parts to dealers. Mercedes aims for its cars to be ready for shipment within 2 to 3 working days. It has to use companies like Freightliner to ensure that these deliveries can happen on time. Reverse logistics is the final stage and involves products going back from the consumer to the entity. This can happen when there are faults or to allow for recycling. Mercedes handles good returns through its showrooms. It outsources the scrapping of its goods to Autogreen Limited, but if it handled this itself, it would need a transport network of its own to handle old cars. Daistruk is a 3PL firm operating exclusively in Roundland. It owns 35 warehouses and runs transportation for clients, owning many tractor units and trailers. It can either control logistics itself or follow instructions from a client, depending on its needs. It runs 90 warehouses belonging to clients and is responsible for providing labour and inventory handling at these locations. The pre-scene tells us that Daistruk, like many other 3PL companies, makes use of IT systems. This means that for warehouses and managers on behalf of clients, instructions are sent electronically between companies, and services are tracked so that Daistruk can monitor the movement of items and vehicles. Its transportation staff can remotely manage goods and select the most efficient routes. There is a similar system for its warehouses, where staff receive instructions telling them which pallets to pick up. There is scope for greater use of technology, as Daistruk could use robots to provide much of the work done in warehouses, which would improve efficiency. Driverless vehicles may also revolutionize the future market. Ensuring that IT systems use the most up-to-date software is also key, so the monitoring is as accurate as possible. Malta Motors, a company talked about in detail in the pre-scene, will have similar logistics to Mercedes-Benz. It will need to ensure that the supplies it procures arrive on time, that it has a sufficient inventory to continue production in case of delays, or in case of issues in the supply chain.
Our penultimate video then is our list of top 10 issues. Now, this is a compilation of what we believe to be the most common and likely issues to appear in the case study exam. And while not an exhaustive list, and not in any particular order, this list is designed to focus your revision by giving you a list of subjects that you should revise to cover yourselves in the exam. And so once again, this cuts down on your study time by giving you a list of theories and issues that you can then use to prioritise your learning. Pete, once again, will be going through one of these issues to demonstrate how we pick them, what to think about, and the theories you'll need to revise should you see an issue like this appear in the SCS exam.
So with that out the way, let's now take a look at our first issue, our top 10 issue number 10, and that is funding. So why have we chosen funding as a likely issue? Well, it's a key F3 topic. It's one of the most likely F3 topics to arise. And it ties to many different subtopics within that. You think about equity funding, debt funding, the cost of capital. It's very, very commonly examined and is mentioned as part of your key role in CIMA's SCS guide. And it's usually likely going to arise as an add-on question. So you might not be given a specific question about funding, but you might be given a question about a particular option or something like that. And then, of course, it's part of your role to then assess how this particular option, how this particular investment opportunity, etc. will be financed. And cash will be needed to support large investment projects because the company doesn't have that much in the bank, as I'm going to come on to in a moment. So likely issues for this could be for investing in new organic growth. For example, opening up a new centre, opening up a new inland port, whatever it might be. It could be to cover a hole in the short-term working capital to prepare for negative cash flows. as we saw in the pre-scene, they don't have that much cash in the bank, but they have very high trade payables. They've got 22,000 staff members who are all going to need paying their salaries, etc. It could also be for something big, such as an acquisition of another company or new projects that the organization is undertaking. And again, reiteration there that it's most likely to perhaps arise as an add-on issue. So tacked onto a question around a particular option, how you're going to fund that, how you're going to finance that. And some key points to bring up as you are going through the questions on this, if you're answering a question on it, is that at the time of the financial statements, so looking at the pre-scene, the financial statements, we had 32 million Rowlandian dollars in the bank. Now that may sound like a lot, but remember that a lot of that is going to be needed for different working capital requirements, for salaries, for trade payables, for liabilities. The liability is very, very high already. You can see in the statement of financial position that the current liabilities of Daistruk was 238 million Rowlandian dollars. So you couldn't, in theory, pay off your current liabilities with the cash you have. Now, of course, we have millions in trade receivables as well, so that could go towards that. But, of course, you have to counter for bad debt and things like that. The long and short of it is, if suddenly we have this great option to expand, to purchase a ship or whatever it may be, but it's going to cost hundreds of millions of Rowlandian dollars, we do not have the cash available for that at the moment. And also, cash flow budgeting is critical. If we don't get enough money coming in, it doesn't mean that we can postpone paying our salaries. Our salaries still need to be paid. So you need to have enough of perhaps a buffer buffer cash in the bank to fund negative cash flows. If you've got a period, there's a seasonality aspect to it, if there's an economic downturn and you've got negative cash flows for a couple of months, you need to have enough reserves in order to keep yourself alive during that period. And then with regards to longer term debt funding as well, we've already got medium to high gearing with 65% or 39.55%, depending on whether you use the long-term debt over equity or long-term debt over long-term debt plus equity. There is no right or wrong answer. Students do often ask, well, do we use this one? Do we use that one? There's no right or wrong answer, provided that you are always using the same one. So you're not comparing perhaps yourself, Daistruk, with the Carey Group using different calculations. You're not comparing year on year using different calculations. As long as you state the one that you are using and you always use the same one, then it doesn't matter which one you are using. Also, another aspect, another point that you can bring up, and again, this is all about getting your application to the pre-scene in there, using facts, using figures from the pre-scene, is that we do have 530 million Rowlandian dollars in tangible assets, which could be potentially used as security to raise debt. Now, of course, there might be restrictive covenants on assets if we are putting them up as collateral. So we need to make sure that we're not perhaps using that fixed debt or using those as a fixed asset, because, of course, we may end up having to not be able to use that asset for specific means. And of course, we need to use our assets because that's how we generate revenue. The difference, I suppose, there being between a fixed and a floating charge, or a floating charge where you can still use the asset. You are not giving up control of that asset to the organization that is using it as collateral. And so relevant theory to bring up here, of course, the Mendelow's matrix, your stakeholders here, the lenders, the equity providers, key shareholders, perhaps key players, lenders, if you're talking about the bank, perhaps in the keep satisfied category. So that's a classic one that you can use, because, of course, you need to factor in your stakeholders into every point that you bring up as well. That's another key part of being a senior manager, key role as being the senior manager at Daistruk in the case study. You can also look at things like the advantages of debt versus equity. Debt can be very quick. It's often a low-cost way of raising funds, but at the same time, you do, of course, have to pay that back. It's going to increase your finance costs. So if we look at the pre-scene, our interest cover is quite high at the moment. Whereas equity, you do have to obviously go through the effort of raising funds through equity funding. It can be very expensive. It can take a long time. It can take 7, 8, 9 months to actually go about raising the funds in that way. But of course, the advantage of that is you do not need to pay back the capital. Now, of course, this depends on what our shareholders actually want, but in theory, you do not need to pay back the capital because dividends are optional. It's not a legal requirement to pay dividends. So particularly if you needed to raise hundreds of millions of Rwandan dollars, that might be the more appropriate way of doing it.
Finally, our last video is on the mock debriefs. After doing all the above, what you now need to do is practice your mock writing skills. But breaking down a question and writing a solution is far easier said than done. So this is why we have a mock debrief video series, and these videos explain how we would break down the questions in the mocks and form plans to write a solution. That will then, of course, maximize your marks during the exam and help you learn from your mistakes. So to that end, Pete will now break down the question to the first task in our mini-mock to demonstrate this process.
So how this video is going to work is we're going to go through each question one by one, looking at how we would approach the question and then looking at a plan for the answer. And so there are 3 questions in this mini-mock, similar to the actual exam where you'll have 3 questions as well, split into various different subtasks. The big difference, of course, though, this being a mini-mock, it's only half the size. So rather than having 3 60-minute questions, we have 3 30-minute questions, as you can see here. And this is very representative of the type of question, the format of question that you will get in the exam. Most likely taking the form of an email or a memo, and you'll have some subtasks to answer. So we've got the first task here, and this is an email from Rasim, who is the CFO, about a trade school opportunity. Now, the first thing I always suggest to students to do is to not look directly at the material straight away, but rather look at the requirement lines. And this is important for 2 reasons. One is that it will give you the split of the subtasks. So we can see subtask A is worth 60%, subtask B is worth 40%. And this will allow us to then calculate the amount of marks of content we need to write for each one. So if we think of this as being a mini-mock, it's 30 minutes rather than 60, so therefore around 16, 17 marks rather than 32, 33 marks. We can split that up into roughly 10 marks for subtask A and 7 marks for subtask B. And this is a useful thing for us to do because it now means that we know we need more marks for subtask A. If we split our time, if we split our marks evenly, we wouldn't actually be utilizing the marks available effectively enough. If, for example, we decided that we were going to do 8 marks for each of these or 9 marks for each of these, we would perhaps be losing out because we wouldn't be getting every mark that we could get for subtask A because we've only been writing to 8, 9 marks when there are 10 available, and we'd be wasting our time on subtask B because if we write 8, 9 marks worth of content for subtask B, it's just surplus. They're not going to give us those extra marks because there are only 7 marks available for subtask B. So that's the first reason why I suggest that students always look at the requirement lines first. The second reason is because it helps narrow down the points that you're trying to look for. It narrows down the points that you need to raise. So for example, we see here with subtask A, we've got to do an evaluation of the viability of a proposed project for Daistruk on the assumption that we use our cost of capital of 8%. Now, of course, we can't just answer the question based on that because we need more information. But what it does show is that we are now looking for the viability of a proposed project. So if this question was a lot longer and there was reference material, lots of information in, and we just opened up our question on the system in the exam and we started looking at everything line by line, and we started thinking, oh, well, that could mean this and that could mean that. Unless we know what we're looking for, we might be wasting our time. So it's always better to know roughly what you are looking to do, the answer you're looking to answer, before you start analyzing the rest of the question, analyzing the rest of the reference material, because you may be wasting your time. Because there may be unnecessary information. There might be extra information that you don't need to answer the question. So if you're spending time looking through it, analyzing it, thinking what it could mean, what you could say about it, you're wasting your time. So what we can see though is that it is about a proposed project for Daistruk on the assumption that we use our cost of capital. And the subtask B is actually fed into that. It's recommending a way for us to move forward with this project, including the justifications and key strategic actions for us over the next few months. So let's look at this proposed project. Board has identified a potential opportunity to set up a trade school that will provide training and offer apprenticeships in fields such as inventory, storage, and shop floor management, and also offer heavy goods vehicle driver training. So what we're saying here is that we're going to set up a trade school. The location is going to be Central City due to the population side and proximity to a number of our clients and sites. So the first things that we should be thinking there is, okay, there is a need for that, because we know from the pre-scene that there is a big risk over drivers, the amount of drivers that are required, and the training that is needed. So it helps overcome one of those risks if we are going to be training drivers ourselves. What we can also see is that things such as inventory and storage management are things that we have expertise in. We have plenty of knowledge, of experience, expertise in those areas. Those are some of the main services that we offer here at Daistruk. We can offer those, we can train people in those. But shop floor management is not something that we are perhaps as well versed in. This is more of the client side. You think of Murdoch supermarkets, for example. They'll have their own system for managing the shop floor. So we wouldn't have all the necessary experience to do this, the necessary expertise. We might need to add people to our teams to do this, because we can't actually offer all these courses. We don't have the knowledge to necessarily offer all of these at the moment. So that would be perhaps a negative aspect when we think about the suitability. You can see here that I'm building the suitability, acceptability, feasibility model up, because that is often the best way, the best model to use to analyze any kind of project, because it provides structure. It also provides idea generation as well, because you think of the sorts of things that fit under suitability, the sorts of things that fit under acceptability, the sorts of things that fit under feasibility. So it's a good model for that as well. So as you can see, I've just started to populate the rest of that suitability, acceptability, feasibility model as well. And things that we don't quite know about yet, we're not perhaps able to answer this, such as the cost of this project. How much is it going to cost us? We don't have the knowledge for things like shop floor management, and also the needs of a school, the needs of students who are being trained is going to be different than when we just do it as part of our operations. So do we have the resources to actually create this school and to teach people? Are we going to need to add people with the relevant experience of running a school like this to our team? And how easy is that going to be? How feasible is that going to be? And then we think about acceptability. Well, employees, are they going to be particularly impacted by this? Potentially not, but they may fear if we're training the next generation that we're training their replacements. But on the other side, we might be training their next reports. As in, if the people at the bottom of our organization currently, they're going to have the opportunity for promotion because they're going to have another generation, another crop of people coming in underneath them. And shareholders, of course, generally, if it's something that is going to generate revenue, help diversify and our revenue as well, which is an important part, that's part of mitigating risk, they're going to be happy about it, as long as it's not going to negatively affect operations. And this is in response to a report from the newly created Industry Insight Unit, please see the attached report, along with the forecast cost of the project. So what we need to do now is take a look at that reference material. And there's a side note here The reference material, CIMA has given it to you for a reason. There is always going to be a reason why they have provided you with the reference material. There's going to be key information within that you need to use, you need to utilize in your answer. So a key finding was the increasing demand for employees in the logistics and retail industries. That's where the shop floor management one comes in. And how demand will outstrip supply by 2030, particularly in areas such as inventory and storage management, heavy goods drivers, and shop floor management. So we know there is a reason for doing this. It's recommended that we're doing this because there is going to be a shortage of employees. We know that a shortage of employees was a key risk in the risk report. Furthermore, in order to meet its unemployment targets, the Rowlandian government has announced a subsidy program for any organisation offering training and apprenticeships in high-demand industries like logistics and retail. So that's going to help with the feasibility of it. There could be potential cost savings for us for doing it. It's good for our relationship with the government. And also, apprenticeships are booming at the moment. In the real world, apprenticeships, particularly in the UK, etc., are becoming more and more popular, more and more people choosing to go down the apprenticeship route rather than universities. Because, of course, with an apprenticeship, you start earning, you start earlier, you start gaining experience, and all the actual academic training and the other training as well is provided as part of that. So you will come out of your apprenticeship probably the same time a university student will finish their degree, but you've been earning for 3 years, you haven't taken on debt, you've got all the same training now that the person that had the degree has, and you've got 3 years experience on top of that. So apprenticeships are very popular in the real world at the moment. Training and development options for graduates and unemployed Rowlandian citizens currently remains limited due to on-the-job training and higher education institutions like universities, where there is a skills gap because of the focus on the less practical academic elements of the course. So we recommend starting a small-scale trade and apprenticeship school, educating attendees in the above areas and providing them with placement and job opportunities. So there's a benefit to us there, many benefits to us in that we are training people, we're earning money from training people, and we're offering them placement opportunities as well. So we are helping to get the buy-in from them as well. When they've graduated, they'll want to come and work for us rather than go to work at a competitor, and that helps with the shortage of employees, which of course was a key risk in the risk report. And the analysis of the proposed trade school, it shows that there is a positive net present value, so that usually you'd say with acceptability to shareholders, going to add value to shareholders. The concern there is that it is over the next few years going to cost around about 24 million Rowlandian dollars. That's almost as much money as we have in the bank at the moment. We have about 30 million in the bank. But remember, a lot of that will be needed for things like working capitals, staff salaries, and also trade payables, which are already well over 200 million Rowlandian dollars. So we cannot just assume that all of that money is available for using for investments. So we might need to look at other forms of investing or other forms of raising that revenue. Perhaps it could be through debt funding or additional equity funding, although for such a small scale relative, that is, to the size of the organization, debt funding would be the most likely outcome. What we could also say as well, an important factor to consider here is that if it is around and it is successful, it could operate indefinitely. So we'd be diversifying our revenue streams and we'd be protecting ourselves from the risk of employee shortages in the future. However, the discount factor, the 8%, remember that was what they said in the question was the usual cost of capital. So the usual cost of capital for Daistruk projects. Now remember, this is brand new. If we think about Ansofts, this is high risk. This is a market we do not know. This is a service that we do not know. It's high risk. So using our usual cost of capital for the normal projects we normally do here at Daistruk is perhaps inaccurate. So one of our ways in which we recommend moving forward with this project could be rerun the cost of capital to ensure that it is still profitable with a higher rate. we should justify it because it is going to diversify us, it is going to help mitigate our risks, it is something that could be feasible provided we can raise the funds. And then with the key actions really important when you are a senior manager. How are you going to take this forward? And the best part of them, though, is they can be quite generic. You can say things like, we need to put together a project team, we need to organize the funding, we need to gain board approval, we need to analyze what went well, what didn't go well when the project is complete. So it's quite easy to answer questions like that. So hopefully you'll get a question like that in your exam. But as you can see, we've done quite a lot of analyzing through the different text in this question. We're now going to switch to a different screen to look at our skeleton structure plan for this answer.
And that now brings us to the end of this highlights reel for our case study videos. However, these are not the only resources you will have available on the Astranti case study course. On top of these materials helping you pass the exam, minimizing study time, and giving you value for money, we also have a wide range of different materials to assist you in all these endeavors and much more. So starting with the pre-scene analysis pack, alright? As shown, we go through the pre-scene in 6 videos, 7 for SCS, which also includes some comprehension questions to help you revise the pre-scene, as well as an annotated version of the pre-scene you see in the video to download. Now in this series, you also have the strategic analysis, top 10 issues, and of course the industry analysis videos to review, and these all come as part of the pre-scene course on with Astranti. Now these will help set you off in the right direction, and we've been making these case study materials for students for over a decade now, and they are consistently seen as one of the most valuable products we offer, which many students have said have helped them pass the exam. However, if you want more, like for example 7 mocks to practice on, marking and feedback, additional support like the exam technique video series, 3 masterclasses, tutor and mentor support, then you can get all this, including the pre-scene videos mentioned previously, in the premium level course. And as another bonus, if in the unfortunate event you were not to pass the exam, premium course students will also get a double pass guarantee. Don't fret though. If you don't want all of these products, and you just want the mocks or the pre-scene analysis videos, you can also do that too by purchasing them individually. And so with that, we've come to the end. And so I and everyone at Astranti want to wish you all the best in your upcoming strategic case study exam. And if you'd like to find out more about these products, please visit us at astranti.com/CIMA.